Good morning. Let's get right into your intelligence briefing for Wednesday, February 11th, 2026. We're breaking down some major developments you absolutely need to have on your radar today.
All right, here's our roadmap. We're going to kick things off with India's new digital rules, a real game changer for tech companies. Then we'll jump into some key political and governance updates. After that, we'll get into the auto industry's emissions debate, look at a couple of fascinating editorials, and then wrap it all up with a snapshot of the market close.
So let's start with our lead story. And believe me, this is a big one. India is getting really serious about policing online content, and this is going to have a massive ripple effect on every single social media platform operating there. Okay, so the government just put new IT rules on the books. They're targeting two things. First, AI-generated content like deepfakes, which now have to be clearly labeled. But the real kicker? It's the new, much faster deadlines for taking down illegal material. And this isn't some far-off plan. These rules go into effect on February 20th. So why does this matter so much? Well, it all comes down to a legal concept called safe harbor. You can think of it as a protective shield. It's what keeps platforms from getting sued over stuff their users post. Without it, they'd be legally responsible for every single post. And these new rules are making it painfully clear. If you don't play by our new, fast rules, you lose that shield.
And here's where you can really feel the squeeze. The time that platforms have to take down illegal content has been absolutely crushed. We're talking about going from having a whole day, maybe more, to act, down to just a couple of hours.
If a court or the government says something is illegal and needs to come down, a new clock starts ticking. The platforms have exactly 3 hours to get it done, period.
And it gets even faster. For the really sensitive, harmful stuff, deepfakes or images shared without consent, they get only 2 hours. That is an incredibly tight window.
So here's the bottom line. For these big tech companies, the entire game has just changed. It's no longer about having good policies written down somewhere. It's now purely about operational speed. It's a race against the clock. If their teams miss these deadlines, they risk losing that safe harbor protection, which could open them up to a world of legal and financial pain.
All right, let's move on to macro, politics, and governance. We're tracking 4 key updates from across the country for you.
First up, the Supreme Court has agreed to hear a petition filed against the Chief Minister of Assam, Himanta Biswa Sarma. He's being accused of making hate speeches, and the petitioners are pushing for a formal police investigation, or FIR, to be filed against him.
Staying in Assam, there's a pretty big controversy brewing over the state's voter rolls. In a recent revision, check out these numbers. About 787,000 names were added, but more than 1 million names were deleted. Now, officials are saying many of these deletions were due to deaths, but you can imagine, in a politically charged state like Assam, a net reduction like this is raising a lot of questions.
Now, over in Delhi, we have a really interesting policy shift. The Chief Minister has announced a new welfare program for girls. It's designed to provide financial support at key life stages, from birth to adulthood. What's important here is that it's replacing an older scheme that had a huge problem. Hundreds of crores of rupees were just sitting untouched in bank accounts, not actually reaching the girls it was meant to help. And our final macro update comes from West Bengal, where we're seeing what looks like a classic pre-election move. The government has decided to move up the launch of a new allowance for unemployed youth. It was originally slated for August, but now it's going to kick off on April 1st, just ahead of the 2026 state elections. Okay, let's shift gears and talk business, specifically focusing on the automotive sector. There are a couple of really important conversations happening right now that are going to shape the future of cars in India.
So here's the big question that everyone in the auto industry is asking. As India prepares to bring in even tougher emissions standards, are small cars going to get a bit of a break?
This is a huge deal. The government is debating whether to ease up on the next wave of emissions rules called CAFE 3 for the small car segment. If they do, it's a major win for manufacturers of entry-level cars and helps keep prices down for buyers. But if they don't, those companies are looking at some pretty significant compliance costs coming their way in 2027.
And here's the other major challenge facing the industry. India is pushing hard for stricter regulations and for more electric vehicles. But there's a bottleneck. The country's vehicle testing facilities just can't keep up with the demand. And this isn't just a minor headache, it's a strategic problem that could actually slow down the rollout of newer, cleaner cars.
Let's turn to the editorial pages now. We've got two pieces that are worlds apart but both incredibly thought-provoking. One is about the future of global arms control, and the other is about how AI could completely transform some unexpected industries.
First, arms control. The latest major nuclear arms reduction treaty between the US and Russia, known as New START, is set to expire this year. This is a pretty big moment, as it basically marks the end of a framework that's been in place for decades to keep nuclear arsenals in check.
And one editorial is sounding a serious alarm. The core argument is that with this treaty expiring and with global tensions being what they are, we could be on the verge of a new arms race. The fear is a domino effect that this could also weaken other critical treaties that are meant to stop the spread of nuclear weapons. Now for something completely different and, frankly, pretty amazing. Another editorial is exploring the power of generative AI. It turns out AI can now be used to design and create brand new proteins from the ground up. This could be a total game changer for medicine. For instance, scientists have used it to create a synthetic substance that actually neutralizes snake venom. Imagine a future where we don't need to rely on animals to produce things like antivenom.
And finally, let's wrap things up with a quick look at how the markets closed.
At the end of trading, the Sensex was up 0.25%, closing at 84,274. The US dollar saw a small bump up to 90.56. The big story in commodities was gold, which jumped nearly 1.4%. Brent crude oil also saw a slight uptick, closing at 68.91 a barrel. And that is your briefing for today. Thanks for joining us.